Good morning, Mike. How you doing? Happy Wednesday.
Hey man, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. Doing well.
Good.
I woke up this morning and a weird thing happened. My weight went down for the first time since this all started, which was a nice feeling.
Your
Felt
weight
good.
went down and you didn't
I
run.
know.
You didn't run this morning. You just told me. So,
Maybe that's the secret, not running.
okay. Good for you. Yeah, I haven't stepped on a scale recently. I'm a little
Yeah,
afraid to because of the
yeah.
the quarantine diet, hashtag quarantine diet.
I know.
But you've been noticing it ticking up over the last
Oh,
couple
for
months?
sure, for
Really?
sure, for
Okay.
sure. Well, no. This not the last couple of months, but certainly the last few weeks,
Okay. Yeah.
as the quarantine diet really kicked in.
Sure.
But
Sure.
yeah, but yeah,
Wow. Well, good.
yeah. So Wednesday, welcome everybody. If you have any questions, please feel free to provide them to us, and any comments we will respond to. Send questions to oswdaily at gmail.com, and any comments, and we'll happily respond to you and include them as part of the show. So Mike,
Awesome.
what's on your mind this morning?
Lots on my mind, Steve. Wednesday, so it's Workplace Innovator Interactive Day. My live
Hmm.
stream at noon Eastern today. Join us, folks. Go to workplaceinnovator.com to register. And the conversation is going to be around this idea, which everybody's talking about. We talked about it yesterday, the return to the workplace or return to work. And I'm just thinking a lot about it. I know you were thinking a lot about it and you shared a quote with me or a question. I think we should start there and then I'll
Start
I'll
there.
kind of use this
Sure.
conversation to be a springboard into my live stream later. But I have a lot of thoughts on this and I'm a little bit concerned, a little bit excited, but also just curious to see where this goes.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, the quote I sent to you was from Liz Ryan, founder and CEO of Human Workplace. And I just have it to my left, so people think I'm reading. I am reading because I don't want to misquote people. When the quarantine is over, how can managers justify bringing people back into the office after they've proven they can do their jobs from home? What possible argument is there to support making people commute to and from work every day after we know that it isn't essential to do? It's a great question, and it
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
leads you to think so many different iterations. So I said it to you. You've had some time to think about it. What's in your mind?
Well, as a lifelong remote worker and someone who's worked for a corporation that's based in Houston, I'm here in DC for 2 years plus now, and I go in every quarter, maybe for a meeting or for gatherings with my team, but also see them on the road. I would often see them at conferences and other events, other industry events. So there's that opportunity to connect face to face in person. We didn't do as much Zooming back then as we've learned to do in recent weeks, of course. But I tell you what, is those, and for me, and that's what I'm going to be kind of a strange person to be arguing the case for going back into the physical workplace because I think it's necessary as human beings. There's something that happens that can't happen over Zoom. It can't happen when we're dispersed and disconnected for long periods of time. And again, it's going to be a challenge to get people comfortable, and different folks will be on different timelines. But isn't it true that collaboration and innovation takes place when people are together doing that? I mean, you're more, I think, experienced with working with teams and also having distributed teams as well as having a corporate headquarters there in New York City that you would go to. And you did both, right? You were doing remote work as well as in the office work. Are there things that you are missing? And maybe it's too soon to say because it's only been 5 or 6 weeks, but can you see a reason to go back and have those in-person connections, or is it not necessary?
What I found when I was doing the 2 days from home, 3 days in the office, I was very specific in the tasks I performed on the days I was in the office and the days I worked from home. Days from home was head down work, thinking, reading, catching up on things I could do by myself. So really heads down. The days I was in the office was collaboration. It was getting with the team. We were doing team meetings. All meetings happened in those 3 days. So it was a very different type of dynamic. And the week was structured that way. When the pandemic hit and we all went to work from home, that sequence didn't change. the meetings were set up. It just we just kept recurring. Now, are those meetings as effective? Are those meetings as productive? Elements are for sure. Elements aren't, because to your point, right, that social interaction, there is the body language thing. So we see each other, we see, it's I'm having to lift my hand so you can see my emotion and sort of
Yeah.
allow you to see that thing, right? But I'm
I do
doing
it all the
that so
time.
you can actually, so you can see it. Where in a meeting room and you're sitting closely with people, then you don't necessarily have to show the same emotion because you just read each other's body language. So there's that element to it as well. Um, but it's, yeah, it is so tough. But the other thing, so my as you were asking me the question, my thought back to you was one of, so you are a remote worker, so you probably have the ability to give an opinion on, if this is sustained, is there diminishing returns that you find or you have found in what you did when you didn't have the social interaction, when you went to the office or you met with your team at conferences? Is there diminishing, and almost whenever you get those social interactions, there's an elevation or a return to a baseline? I'm curious to know what you have
Absolutely.
found.
I think there is. That's what I'm kind of trying to get my head around and how to articulate this well, Steve. It's this idea of the culture of the organization. And I talk about it a lot on my podcast. Culture drives change, culture drives productivity, culture drives people's feeling connected to their workplace, connected to their organization, connected to the mission of the company they're working for, which is so important to get people to be happy and also be productive. We've talked about it in many, many different contexts around mostly productivity and health and well-being, and the value of having that feeling of connection, that culture piece is so important. And as a remote worker, I've always felt, even though it's not anybody's fault, it's nobody's dropped the ball. It's just there's something inherently different about being, you know, out here on my own on an island in DC when there are gatherings in Houston taking place that I just don't get to be a part of. You know, that
Mm.
the Taco Tuesday or the and again, I miss all the birthdays. I've been watching, I've been binge watching The Office with Michael Scott, and the party planning committee. It's always a big thing about whose birthday is it, and what's it going to look like. And that's such a fun part of that show because it taps into that kind of an annoying part of corporate culture and office culture. But I tell you, we're human beings, and those connections are real. And yes, they can be annoying at times, but on balance, I think we can't do without it completely. We have to have
Mm.
some human connection with our workplaces and the people there, and the leadership. And I just don't think it can be replaced. I may be wrong. There are companies that just operate fully as distributed workforces and they're successful. I know that's a fact, but when it comes to driving mission and connection and human, just being part of something bigger than yourself,
Yeah.
it's for me, it's been a struggle a little bit at times, not always.
Yeah, and as you were talking there, my mind was sort of wandering a little bit in a sense of, are we okay working remotely today because the entire team is working remotely? We don't miss something.
Good point.
Where if we're working from home and the team's in the office, do we feel we're missing something, right? Is there a disconnection that the rest of the team is feeling? That's something I haven't considered before. And I obviously you touched on it. And I wonder, do you feel that less so today because the entire team is working from home
I
than you
think
would
so.
previously?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think there's a difference. I mean, I haven't stopped and consciously thought it through, but you're right,
Yeah.
because everybody's in the same boat right now. What happens when we begin to reopen offices? And I'm sure it's going to be an option, right? I think anybody who's been reading the news and reading articles, and as you and I have, and talking about this, and understanding the anxiety and the psychological side of this pandemic and the fear over COVID-19, and knowing that more people are more susceptible than others, and some people feel very young and very immune because they're very strong and healthy to begin with, and others have some, more concern because of certain preconditions they have, or some others are just it's going to be really hard to get over that hurdle. We've been really put into this mindset of this is some life or death situation, and in many ways it is, but it's going to be different for everybody. And I've heard it said we're going to have certain levels of PSTD coming back to the office, the
Hmm.
hyper awareness. And again, this is somebody, I've told you, I'm a germaphobe. I've been hyper aware for 10, 20 years, if not more, of bathroom handles and people not washing their hands and germs everywhere and where they possibly could be. Cause I travel a lot, airports, planes, I'm the
Mm.
guy who wipes down the tray and his seats and his armrests on the airplane. This is years ago before COVID-19 was even in our consciousness. So I think the rest of the world is going to be caught up with me in this. There's kind of this uh, psychological roller coaster you go through where you have to balance because you can get out of it can get out of control if you start thinking there's a germ on every surface. It's potentially debilitating. It's paralyzing because you feel like you can't go anywhere, can't touch anything. And now they're talking about the way this thing travels, airborne, and is 6 feet enough, or does it need to be 12 feet or 32 feet or whatever? Because the air particles out there. Can you
Right.
imagine? Those of us who've been awakened to this idea, going back into any closed space. And you say it on a bus, a train, a subway, or in an office conference room. How can you not be sitting there in the conference room while the person even down the other end of the boardroom table coughs or sneezes, and your mind's going to really go to the
Mm.
particles in the air. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a challenge. So it gets me a little bit concerned, and it's certainly going to have to open leadership, and workplace leaders have to really consider the people and the individuality and the differences in all of us. So you're one who's very hyper concerned. I mean, what are you thinking when I describe those things?
No, whenever you were talking through that, what was going through my head, and my perspective, and the questions that I'm asking myself is, and curious to know your thoughts too, and obviously people can contribute and give their opinions as well. When I go into the office, or when I typically go into the office, and when I think about getting into the office, am I more or less conscious of this environment with people I know and people I don't know? It's something we don't know until we're in that moment. But in essence, as I walk into a building, what is the emotion I go through when I see somebody who works at the company I work at and someone who doesn't? When I walk into the office and I see my teammates or I see people on another team, what will be that emotional connection? I think, I sense, I don't know. Will I feel more comfortable with my immediate team? And if I
I think
do,
you, yeah, I think you will.
if I
Go
do, and
ahead.
this is sort of the question that I sort of come back and I sort of finish the thought is, well, what if we created rooms where teams operate, right? And in those rooms, we allow the team to go to so that people feel more at ease. I don't know if that's something that we should consider. We need to consider. I don't know. Is what are your thoughts about that? How do you feel? Do
Yeah,
you feel differently? Would you act differently?
I do. Here's what I came to mind right away. First of all, it's family. For me, raising a couple
Mm,
kids and a wife, and I think any extension of family, a close family, or even close friends. This doesn't You don't have to have a wife and family, but it's the idea of them even if they're sick, you're not afraid of their germs. But
right.
the stranger on the bus, or the stranger on the subway, or the stranger at the airport who has those same germs, those same symptoms, is like, a disgusting pariah. We need to get away from me, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
take that whatever that human, you know, difference is, the way we process information, and put it into the workplace. You've got those people, you've got the team members you're comfortable with. You feel like you know them and trust them, and you have almost a sense of empathy. And when they get sick or they have something going on, that you don't immediately think about yourself and say, "Oh, get away from me." You think, "Oh, how can I help? Let me put my arm around you." And
Right.
it's
Right.
almost like, it also reminded me, remember we mentioned yesterday or the day before about, will we shake hands anymore in our society? Dr. Fauci was predicting, or even suggesting, that we don't need to shake hands anymore because it's such a bad way that even in a regular flu season things get spread. So I think about some of the people I see who I consider friends in certain contexts, like the guy who runs my local um, cafe where I go for breakfast, once or twice a month. Excuse me. And he is this great gregarious guy. I know it's his store. He runs this great, short order cook, greasy spoon. If you want a great breakfast, you go to Joe's Cafe. Little plug for anybody in the DC area. But I imagine going back there once you know, we reopen the economy and he gets to open his doors again. Because right now he's mandated to be closed. I'm going to want to shake his hand and say, let me support you as a business
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Have you thought through those types of individual encounters yet?
No, no, I have, and that's sort of where my process it started, right? So how would I feel about seeing my team? How would I feel? And it's like I see you, like I don't want to not shake your hand and give you a hug, right? And but then there's going to be a different emotion for me to get to you. I have to use public transport. I have to interact with other people. How do I feel about those? And absolutely, the individuals who I see and do business with on a regular basis, it's like, absolutely, I want to see those folks. I want to ensure they're okay. And, it makes me smile thinking about actually interacting with those people again,
Yeah. Yeah.
There is that side of it too, and then dovetailing back into what Liz Ryan was saying, she did caveat by saying that there are those who are more productive at home, but then there are those who are not. So, how do we think about those who are not and allowing them to get back into an environment where they can be more productive? And what does it need, or what do we need to do as a real estate industry to allow those people to feel comfortable? And then also, extension of that, what services do we need to ensure that they feel comfortable going to? So, for example, they go to the office, is there enough Joe's Cafe, is at a open so they can get breakfast or lunch or whatever it is they need to get, as a service, to go to actually be able to move forward. I don't know what you sort of think about that. Have you given that much thought? And it's how do we allow those people to feel comfortable?
Yeah. I guess we're dealing with, again, two things: the decision of why we need to work productivity wise, and then what is the separate discussion around opening businesses, opening the economy. So the workplace, and for those of us who are from home, are capable of working from home, knowledge workers, there's an ongoing argument that's already happened, and I wonder if there are studies we talked about workplace evolutionaries, we talked about some of the other surveys going on to really just kind of drill down into the effectiveness of people. And for me, because my kids are grown and it's just my wife and I here at my home, and I have a fairly large space relative to the just two of us living, we get spread out. We've gotten annoyed with each other a little bit. I'm not afraid to admit, because it just gets a little claustrophobic when you're stuck in the home for so long. But then I think about those, and I've seen some news reports and I've heard some
Yeah.
stories of people with small children who they're doing the schooling from home at the same time they're trying to work from home, at the same time their spouse or their partner is trying to work from home, and they've never had to do that before. And it's the claustrophobia plus the inefficiency plus the maybe it's just confined spaces. If you're in New York City or in San Francisco and you're in a small apartment, you're going stir crazy here in week 5 or 6. So there's those desires to get back because they need to escape their work from home environment to be productive. And so that's going to be that, again, individual decisions for individual people. So why, if someone like me can be productive, there's two questions. There's now three questions. I keep adding questions. There's the why do it if you don't need to and you can be productive? Well, there's the culture piece. I want to be connected. Why do it if um, you can be productive or you're not being as productive? Well, you want to get back and have that separation between your personal life and your work life. I get that too. I've always had that desire to keep my personal life separate from my work life, even as an entrepreneur. And then there's that third piece about the overall, conversation going on, between the governors and the president about reopening and relaxing the restrictions and gradually letting businesses reopen. That's not necessarily an impact on us as knowledge workers. That impacts so many others that need to get back to their livelihoods. We talked about that. So it's a lot to think about, and it's a lot to digest. And we've got a lot of work and a lot of things to talk about in the coming weeks for sure. But keep but
Yeah,
but keep it going. What how do we do
yeah.
it?
No, I don't have an answer, right? But it's absolutely something that is front of mind, for everybody. Yes, we have the president who has an opinion. We have the local governors that have opinion. We have governors collaborating and working together, which is which is fantastic, right? In sort of the spirit that's been shown, the leadership that's been shown from those governors. But then trickles down to, okay, actually then it comes down to individual companies, right? How are they going to make those decisions? What do they require? What do they need to be safe, be know they're doing the right thing, right, and feel they're doing the right thing, and you think about the components that some of the components that they may actually need to be considering, right? So there is health and safety of employees. There are legal ramifications. There is how is the workplace itself, the physical space. How's that set up? How is that structured? What protocols does each landlord, each building they operate in, how are they operating, right? What are those protocols? How do we get comfort that those buildings are okay? And we all know we're all in this together. It's one of the most consistent things that I've heard in conversations. We are all in this together. This is no one's fault, and I believe people want to do the right thing, and that's the spirit of which communication is happening. But, as you sort of think through those various things, I mean, what would it take and what do you think we need to be doing as an organization, to allow people to sort of come back? Because there will be people in the workforce that need to come back because they may be working in sales, they may be working in product development, that they need to be together to feel and be productive. Um, what do you sort of
Yeah.
think about those
Well,
things? How do you think that needs to happen?
well, I feel kind of unable to answer that too much because I'm not in that world so
Fair
often. I'm
enough.
not
Fair
making those
enough.
decisions. But I've heard from others, and I've had some great conversations as you have. But is your and I know you haven't physically been there, but is your building completely shut down, or are there some people that are still there? And or are there people that are if so, are there any kind of social distancing guidelines, or has the is the building manager or the company or your facilities team put together protocols yet, or is it still being planned, or what stage are you in this return to work process?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And yes, we have people who do go into the office. It's obviously, and all the social distancing, all the PPE, and all the requirements the CDC are providing are being adhered to, and that's sort of the position that is. And what's been wonderful actually is there is a tradition in our Nordic offices where uh, every Wednesday they do Wednesday buns. So this is
Wednesday
a thing.
buns?
Yeah, so every afternoon buns are given out, and the whole company comes together to eat buns together, right? And that was
Yeah,
the spirit, this sort of common, and it's
it's
wonderful.
like pretzel day, like pretzel day.
Yeah, yeah. So the teams, the actually individual staff who don't go into the office, actually been bringing buns into those people who actually do need to go into the office, and it's wonderful to see these things and hear these stories of the community, right? It is
Yeah.
wonderful. But sort of going back to your question, so where are we? How are we thinking about this stuff? And obviously, I'm trying to be cautious because obviously,
Yeah,
just because it's yeah,
maybe
but
just maybe not even
generally
going into
speaking,
specifics, but
yeah.
are you planning? Yes, you sound like you're
Of
planning.
course, of course, of
Are the
course.
things that you're doing now, because again, I've heard this before, other, especially in my area here in DC, there's a lot of high clearance workers who do top secret or work that cannot be done from home for many reasons. So they
Yeah.
are going into the office, they're using staggered shifts, they're using protocols that were not in place before that now are, again, the CDC guidelines. They're doing that. Can we learn lessons? Are you confident? Are you optimistic that we can learn lessons from what's going on now in these limited ways with limited teams? Does that translate to this broader return to work, or is it going to be blown up as soon as we try to get more and more people into the buildings in
No,
general?
and thank you for giving the context because absolutely everything you said is what is going through the minds, right? And it's how do you set up those protocols? How do you give people comfort? Is it rotational? How do you ensure that there is physical separation so that people do feel comfortable? And rotation, providing support, PPE, and other things. When I say PPE, obviously we're not talking medical grade, but we're talking about the things that the CDC and the government are recommending, right? And that's the sort of level of things we're discussing. And yeah, so it's how do we set those up? How do we ensure that when a decision is made, we as an organization are prepared, right? We
Yep.
don't know when the decision is going to happen. We know it's going to happen differently across location,
Yep.
country. And but what can we do today to allow ourselves to be prepared for when that actually happens? And I'm sure many organizations are going through the same process, have the same uh, procedure set up to allow ourselves to sort of go back to work. And almost I think it dovetails with the sentiment that's in the nation, right? It's coming from the government, it's coming from our governors, it's coming from our mayors, and so then organizations then follow that logical next step.
Sure. I
Yeah.
heard a great podcast this morning. Man, I'm losing my voice today. Sorry about that, but that doesn't bode well for my live stream here at noon. I got to rest the voice. But the the antibody testing. Have you
Hmm.
been reading? There's a lot more conversation around that, and I know that that was a piece of the puzzle that you were hoping, and I was hoping, would become, more and more a part of this picture of giving us comfort, giving us an understanding that either you have the antibodies or others do that are in the space you're sharing. As they keep kind of now giving all these caveats about the immunity and possible maybe it not being, as comforting. I don't know. I guess they just have to be cautious. But what are your thoughts on antibody testing and what role you think it's going to play in the return to work discussion?
I think antibody testing is really, really important. I think we need to feel that. Again, we go back to I always go back to that social responsibility, right? You know, um, asking ourselves, what do we need to be doing for others? And the first thing I always go back to, as you know, is I got to first look after myself, because that's in looking after myself and ensuring that I'm okay. I'm actually doing my social responsibility for other people, right?
Right.
So I think we have to start there. The antibody test for me is so critical. I do want to have that, so that I feel comfortable. I think each person wants to have that and has the right to want that. But if you take a country of 350 million people in the US, that's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
So how do you start that? How do you begin to roll that out? Who are the first people that should be receiving that test? And that's going to be a tough thing to do as well, right? So
Yeah.
all our health service providers, our first responders, um, those people should be the first ones, right? They're the
Right.
ones who've been on the
Yep.
front line, and let's get them comfortable. Let's get that, make sure that they feel safe, secure, so they can move forward. And then, okay, who then comes after that? Is it by industry? Is it by profession? I don't know. And but
Can you
again,
imagine?
your
Can you
question.
imagine? I hate to cut you off, but we only
No,
have a
no, no, you're
couple
fine.
minutes left, and I really I'm curious to know. Can you imagine a scenario, even at say 6 months from now? Say they're able to ramp up a reliable antibody testing. So we have this period of time before the vaccine is available, even after a vaccine, because if the virus comes back seasonally, uh, do you envision a place where we walk into the workplace and we get our, I was thinking about temperature being taken, but we all know that asymptomatic carriers are out there. So there's got to be a way. And my buddy and I were talking about this even weeks ago. I think the first week of the shutdown, when we were trying to envision going back into restaurants together, because we used to hang out for like a Friday lunch every once in a while. And we're like, if everybody in that restaurant was tested on the way in the door, we'd be comfortable going in there and sitting down and whatever. But is that even something we can envision? Either some type of a rapid test or something that in the workplace where just walking in the door you get tested?
I think we should expect that. Again, this is how do excuse me, how do we put people at ease, right? And part of it is when we walk into a building, knowing everyone that's been tested with their temperature, that's going to lower our or increase our safety, right? Our safety feeling, our securities is going to increase that, right? Because we know the building is testing, and anyone who has a temperature will not be in the building. I think that's important. But I take your question and then I sort of think through your process that you went through at the weekend going to Home Depot, right? You did it, and then you actually sounded a lot more comfortable about doing it again because you did it and you feel good, right?
Sure.
um so I think we should expect that that is the experience. If we want to go to restaurants, and be social with others, I think we have to feel that way. I think we have to expect that. And I think initially, yes, it will be, oh, this is weird. When do you lower your mask? When don't you lower your mask when you're having some food? I think
Mm,
that's going to be an interesting experiment again, but we have to expect that. You know, how long is it going to be where everyone just feels at ease interacting with others? So it's going to be it's going to be a fascinating social experiment.
It will be. I think I answered my
Yeah.
own question, but I'll give you my answer tomorrow. I think
Okay.
I have some thoughts more. Let's go back to this thought about the practical, what it looks like in a real experience, because I think there's the idea of this creating some perfect utopia where everybody's 100% safe, and then there's just some
Yeah.
practical aspects that maybe that can never get there. We got to talk more about just the getting people comfortable and back into some way of operating reasonably. So that's
Yeah.
I'll leave that
Yeah.
as my teaser for
Leave that the
tomorrow, but
hook.
let's
There's the
do it.
hook for tomorrow. There you go.
All
Mike, thank you. Good luck today in your live
right,
stream.
Steve. Thank you, sir.
I'll speak to you soon, mate. Cheers.
Take care.